light, dim the streets in moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, reel by reel we pull apart.
Hey, welcome back to Real Talk, the podcast where we celebrate the magic of movies, the art of storytelling, and the incredible minds behind the camera. I'm your host, Josh, and today we're diving into a topic that's as exciting as it is inspiring. It's my top 10 directorial debuts. So think about this. Every legendary director, every visionary storyteller who has shaped the way we see the world through film had to start somewhere. Whether it was with a bang, a quiet revolution, or a cult classic, these debut films didn't just announce the director's arrival, they kicked the door down and redefined what was possible in cinema. We're talking about the kind of first films that make you sit up and say, wait, who made this? The ones that are bold, fresh, and bursting with a sense of purpose. These movies weren't just calling cards for their directors, they were full-blown statements of intent. They didn't just put their creators on the map. Most of the time, they redrew the map entirely. What makes a great film debut? Is it the originality, the ambition, technical mastery? Maybe it's all of those things, but most importantly, it's that spark, that thing that lets you know you're witnessing the birth of greatness. And today, I want to celebrate the directors who had that spark and wielded it like a torch, lighting the way for their careers and changing cinema forever. Over the next 45 minutes or so, I want to explore 10 incredible debut films that represent a range of genres, styles, and eras that are gritty indie masterpieces. Some are big budget spectacles. From horror to comedy to film noir, these movies show how diverse and brilliant first-time filmmakers can be. And these are also films that were important to me and my growth as a film lover. So whether you're a diehard film buff or just curious about the origins of some of your favorite directors, well, this episode is for you. Go ahead, grab your popcorn or whatever your cinematic snack of choice is, find a comfy spot, settle in. It's time to journey through the films that launched legends. And let's dive into the list. Alright, kicking off our list at number 10 is a film that not only marked a significant debut, but also helped define a genre. I'm talking about John Hughes' 16 Candles. Released in 1984, this teen comedy drama was Hughes' first directorial effort, and it set the gold standard for coming-of-age films in the decade that followed. At its heart, 16 Candles is the story of Samantha Baker, played by the iconic Molly Ringwald, who wakes up on her 16th birthday, only to realize that her family has completely forgotten. It's a premise brimming with relatability, and Hughes uses it to dive into the awkward, hilarious, and heartfelt world of teenage life. What made 16 Candles so groundbreaking was Hughes' ability to mix broad comedy with genuine emotional depth. The film is packed with laugh-out-loud moments like the unforgettable antics of Anthony Michael Hall as the nerdy Ted and the absurdity of the foreign exchange student Long Duck Dong. I know these are some questionable choices today, but in their time they were hilarious. And Hughes never sacrificed sincerity. Beneath the humor, there's a real exploration of the feelings of invisibility and self-discovery that come with adolescence. This balance between comedy and heartfelt storytelling became a hallmark of Hughes' career. With 16 Candles, he essentially created a blueprint for the modern teen movie, paving the way for classics like The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Hughes had a knack for writing teenagers who felt authentic, not caricatures, but real people with dreams, insecurities, and humor. And we can't talk about this film without mentioning its star, Molly Ringwald. 16 Candles not only launched Hugh's directing career, but also made Ringwald the face of a generation. Her performance as Samantha is equal parts awkward, endearing, and relatable, capturing the universal struggles of growing up in a way that still resonates decades later. While the film isn't without its flaws, some of the humor, particularly around Long Duck Dong, has not aged well. It's undeniable, though, that 16 Candles was a cultural milestone. It spoke to the teen experience with a voice that hadn't been heard before, and it launched the career of a director who would go on to shape the landscape of 80s cinema. For John Hughes, 16 Candles wasn't just a debut, it was the start of an era. And it remains a beloved classic that continues to influence filmmakers and charm audiences to this day. Number 9. How do you mock something so perfectly that it not only becomes legendary, but also redefines an entire genre? Enter Rob Reiner's 1984 classic, This Is Spinal Tap, a film that doesn't just parody the rock and roll world, it has now become a rock and roll legend in its own right. Reiner's debut as a feature director was groundbreaking. On the surface, This Is Spinal Tap is a hilarious mockumentary about a fictional British heavy metal band, but dig a little deeper and you'll find a sharp, satirical masterpiece that's as much a love letter to rock and roll as it is a send-up of its most ridiculous excesses. What makes this film so iconic? Well, first there's the sheer brilliance of its humor. Lines like "These go to 11," "None more black," and "It's such a fine line between stupid and clever" have become part of the cultural lexicon. But the humor isn't just the dialogue. It's in the little moments, the sight gags, the absurd scenarios, and the painfully awkward silences that feel all too real. Reiner and his cast improvised much of the film, creating a true sense of authenticity that makes the absurdities even funnier. Then there's the way that Reiner blurs the lines between fiction and reality. By shooting the film as if it were a real documentary, complete with interviews, concert footage, and behind-the-scenes drama, it created a style that felt completely new at the time. The characters of Spinal Tap, David St. Hubbins, Nigel Tufnell, and Derek Smalls, are all so fully realized that many people at the time believed they were a real band. In fact, the band did become real in a way, going on to release albums and perform live. And how many fictional bands can actually lay claim to that? Another layer of genius is how This Is Spinal Tap works on multiple levels. If you're a fan of rock music, you'll appreciate the razor-sharp parody of the genre's cliches, and from the over-the-top stage shows to endless lineup changes and band infighting. But even if you're not a music aficionado, the film's universal themes of ego, failure, and resilience resonate. This is a story about a group of people chasing their dreams, even as those dreams become increasingly unattainable and hilariously misguided. And let's not forget Rob Reiner himself. Before this film, he was still best known as Meathead from All in the Family. With This Is Spinal Tap, he proved he was more than just an actor. He was a filmmaker with a unique vision and voice. This debut set the tone for a career that would include classics like Stand By Me, Misery, The Princess Bride, and When Harry Met Sally. Now, in the years since its release, This Is Spinal Tap has become a touchstone for comedy, inspiring countless other mockumentaries, from Christopher Guest's Best in Show to TV series like The Office and Parks and Rec. Its influence is undeniable, and its humor is timeless. So why does This Is Spinal Tap still resonate all these years later? Well, because it's more than just a comedy. It's a brilliantly crafted piece of filmmaking that captures the ridiculousness of life, art, and everything in between. And of course, because it still goes to 11. At number 8 on my list is the oldest entry, but don't let its age fool you. The Maltese Falcon remains one of the most influential films ever made. Released in 1941, this was John Huston's directorial debut, and what a debut it was. Huston took a classic detective novel by Dashiell Hammett and transformed it into a cinematic masterpiece, cementing himself as one of Hollywood's most talented storytellers. Let's start with the story. The Maltese Falcon is about greed, deception, and the hunt for a mysterious artifact, the titular falcon, that everyone seems willing to lie, cheat, or kill for. It's a maze-like tale filled with double crosses, shady characters, and moral ambiguity. Huston's adaptation takes the twists and turns of Hammett's novel and brings them to life with a razor-sharp precision. And we have to talk about Humphrey Bogart, who plays Sam Spade, the morally ambiguous private eye at the center of it all. Before this film, Bogart wasn't yet the iconic figure we remember today. But the Maltese Falcon changed that. His portrayal of Spade is pitch perfect, cool, cunning, and with just enough vulnerability to keep you rooting for him, even when his actions are less than heroic. Bogart's performance defined the archetype of the hard-boiled detective and set the standard for countless films to come. Huston's direction is what truly sets the film apart. As a first-time director, he demonstrated a level of skill and confidence that many seasoned filmmakers would envy. The dialogue is snappy and precise, capturing the wit and grit of Hammett's prose, while the pacing keeps us on edge from start to finish. Every scene feels meticulously crafted, yet it flows so naturally that you're completely drawn into its world. And then there's the cinematography. Huston worked closely with cinematographer Arthur Edison to create a shadowy, atmospheric look that would become synonymous with film noir. The interplay of light and shadow, the tight framing, and the use of deep focus give the film its distinctive, moody aesthetic. It's a visual style that not only defined the Maltese Falcon, but influenced countless noir films that followed. And then there's the supporting cast: Mary Astor, Sidney Greenstreet, and one of my favorites, Peter Lorre, delivering unforgettable performances as the scheming trio, all vying for the Falcon. Their interactions with Bogart are electric, filled with tension and unpredictability. What makes The Falcon such a standout debut is how complete it feels. Huston wasn't just making a good movie, he was setting the bar for an entire genre. He didn't merely adapt a great novel, he elevated it, creating a film that feels timeless more than 80 years later. So if you haven't seen Maltese Falcon yet, do yourself a favor and watch it. It's not just a history lesson in noir, it's a reminder of how powerful a directorial debut can be. John Huston didn't just step into the world of cinema with this film, he truly took command of it. Number 7. Let's move on to a film that is not just a cornerstone of horror, but a cultural milestone in its own right. Night of the Living Dead, directed by George A. Romero in 1968. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Zombies. We've seen them everywhere, in movies, TV shows, video games, and even on our daily walk through the local grocery store with the hordes of people glued to their phones. Zombies are now pop culture mainstays, but it wasn't always this way. Night of the Living Dead didn't just introduce us to the idea of the zombie apocalypse. It completely redefined the genre, and it did so with a vision that was both terrifying and socially transformative. Romero's Night of the Living Dead was a low-budget indie film that shook the horror world to its foundation. Produced with just $114,000, it was shot in black and white on that shoestring budget, which, in some ways, only added to its eerie, unsettling atmosphere. But what Romero was able to do with such limited resources was nothing short of brilliant. He created an atmosphere of dread and claustrophobia that made us feel trapped alongside the characters. The tension wasn't just in the threat of the undead, it was in the psychological drama between the survivors, a layer of complexity that made the film much more than just a simple monster movie. What's particularly striking about Night of the Living Dead is its social commentary. Released in 1968, the film tapped into the anxieties of its time, racial tensions, civil rights struggles, and the deep divisions within American society. Romero's decision to cast Dwayne Jones, an African-American actor, in the lead role of Ben was revolutionary. At a time when Hollywood was still predominantly white, and its portrayals of African Americans were often limited or stereotypical, Romero gave us a character who was smart, resourceful, and above all, human. Ben is the film's hero, but he's also deeply flawed, just like the rest of the characters. His leadership is tested, his decisions are questioned, and his fate far from certain. By placing a black man at the center of the narrative, Romero invited us to confront our own biases and assumptions. And the film's ending, with its shocking and tragic turn, reinforced this uncomfortable but necessary confrontation with race. It wasn't just the dawn of the dead, it was a dawn of a new kind of storytelling, where horror wasn't just about scares, but about making a statement. Romero's film didn't just set the template for zombie movies. It laid the groundwork for indie horror as we know it today. In an era where studios controlled the purse strings, Romero and his collaborators made a film that proved you didn't need millions of dollars or big-name stars to create something that could change the genre. Night of the Living Dead broke all the rules, and in doing so, it gave birth to a new, more personal and raw style of storytelling. So in a way, when we look at modern zombie films, whether it's 28 Days Later, The Walking Dead, or the more recent Train to Busan, we're seeing the legacy of Romero's original vision. He didn't just bring The Walking Dead, he brought us a terrifying reflection of ourselves and the world around us, making Night of the Living Dead as relevant today as it was in 1968. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor and experience it for the first time, or maybe revisit it. Its power hasn't dimmed, and its influence on the genre and on American cinema as a whole cannot be overstated. George Romero didn't just make a film, he made history. At number 6 on my list is 1984. That year keeps coming up, doesn't it? But it's Blood Simple, the film that marked the debut of two of the most celebrated filmmakers of our time, Joel and Ethan Coen. From the very beginning, Blood Simple made it clear that the Coen brothers were a creative force to be reckoned with. This neo-noir thriller doesn't just tell a story, it grips you, unsettling you with its slow burn tension, clever twists, and a visual style that feels both stark and unforgettable. The title, Blood Simple, comes from the phrase in Dashiell Hammett's novel Red Harvest, referring to the confused, irrational state of mind that people can enter after committing murder. That idea becomes the central theme of the film, as it follows a tangled web of betrayal, suspicion, and violence set in the dusty, desolate landscapes of Texas. With every frame, the Coens immerse you in a world where greed and paranoia drive ordinary people to extraordinary and often horrifying lengths. What makes Blood Simple stand out is how much it accomplishes with so little. Made on a modest budget, the film thrives on its minimalism. Every shot feels deliberate, every line of dialogue sharp and loaded with subtext. The cinematography, by Barry Sonnenfeld, who would go on to become a celebrated director in his own right, is stunning, using shadows and light to create an atmosphere of dread and uncertainty. And let's not forget that iconic tracking shot over a bar top, a moment that's both innovative and unforgettable. But what truly sets Blood Simple apart is that the Coens' trademark mix of dark humor and suspense. They have this incredible ability to make you laugh at just how absurd human behavior is, while simultaneously making you squirm in your seat. That balancing act became a defining characteristic of their later work, but you see it fully formed here, right out of the gate. And the performances are also top-notch, particularly Frances McDormand, who also made her film debut here in Blood Simple. Her portrayal of Abby, a woman caught in the deadly spiral of deceit, is nuanced and compelling. McDormand would go on to become a frequent collaborator with the Coens, earning multiple Oscars along the way, but her raw talent is evident here from the start. Blood Simple was more than just an impressive debut. It was a declaration of intent. It introduced us to the Coen brothers' unique voices, a mix of meticulous craftsmanship, narrative ingenuity, and a love for flawed, deeply human characters. It's impossible to watch this film and not see the seeds of their future masterpieces like Fargo, The Big Lebowski, and No Country for Old Men. For fans of crime thrillers, Blood Simple is a must-watch. It's a film that proves you don't need a massive budget or a blockbuster cast to create something timeless, just a clear vision, undeniable talent, and the courage to take risks. Now at number 5 on my list is 1977's Eraserhead, David Lynch's surreal and unforgettable first feature film. If Eraserhead was your introduction to Lynch, chances are you walked away dazed, confused, and maybe a little unsettled. And maybe that's exactly the point. This isn't just a movie, it's an experience, a descent into a world that feels both alien, yet somehow eerily familiar. On the surface, Eraserhead is a haunting tale about Henry Spencer, a man grappling with the anxieties of parenthood and the oppressive weight of industrial life. But beneath that, it's a nightmarish exploration of fear, alienation, and existential dread. Lynch crafted a world that feels perpetually on edge, where the hum of machinery never stops. Shadows loom large, and every frame filled with dread. The central themes resonate on a primal level. The terror of becoming a parent, of being unprepared and overwhelmed, is distilled into the grotesque image of the baby, a disturbing, otherworldly creature that defies explanation. Its cries pierce through the film's soundscape, becoming an inescapable reminder of Henry's responsibilities and his unraveling psyche. Speaking of sound, Lynch's use of audio in Eraserhead is groundbreaking. The constant industrial drone that pervades the film isn't just background noise. It's a character in itself, amplifying the oppressive atmosphere. Lynch's attention to detail and sound design was so meticulous that it helped set the standard for how audio could be used to heighten tension and evoke emotion in cinema. What's even more remarkable is that Eraserhead was made on a shoestring budget. Lynch spent years piecing it together, often relying on friends and collaborators to keep the project afloat. Despite these limitations, or perhaps because of them, the film feels intensely personal. Every shot, every strange detail, and every unnerving moment reflects Lynch's singular vision. This wasn't just a debut, it too was a declaration. With Eraserhead, Lynch announced himself as a filmmaker who wasn't interested in playing by the rules. He wasn't going to tell stories in conventional ways or offer tidy resolutions. Instead, He invited us into his dreams and his nightmares. Over the years, Eraserhead has become a cult classic, a rite of passage for cinephiles, and a touchstone for surrealist cinema. It is a film that challenges, provokes, and lingers, and for Lynch, it was just the beginning of a career defined by boundary-pushing, dreamlike storytelling. If you haven't seen Eraserhead yet, prepare yourself. It is a journey into the strange and the sublime. Number 4. If there's one film that embodies the spirit of indie filmmaking, it's Sam Raimi's 1981 The Evil Dead. Made on a budget of only about $375,000, this debut is a cinematic miracle. With minimal resources, but an abundance of creativity, Raimi managed to deliver a film that didn't only terrify us, but also redefined what low-budget horror could achieve. The Evil Dead is the story of a group of friends who unwittingly unleash an ancient evil while staying at a remote cabin in the woods. But what sets it apart isn't just the premise, it's the execution. Raimi's fearless, over-the-top approach to horror created something visceral, chaotic, and wildly entertaining. Let's talk about the visuals. Raimi's innovated camera techniques, like the now famous shaky cam, used to represent the POV of the demonic forces, brought an unsettling, frenetic energy to the screen. These low-to-the-ground, rushing shots gave the film its signature style, creating a sense of dread and immediacy that draws you into the chaos. It's the kind of ingenuity that turns a potential limitation, like a lack of professional equipment, into a defining creative strength. Then there's the gore. Oh, the gore. Raimi didn't hold back, delivering gruesome, over-the-top effects that were both horrifying and oddly hilarious. From blood-soaked carnage to dismembered body parts, the film is just the top of the line when it comes to practical effects, especially for the time. Every splatter and scream feels exaggerated to the point of absurdity, and that makes it truly unforgettable. And of course, we can't talk about The Evil Dead without mentioning Bruce Campbell, who plays the now iconic Ash Williams. Campbell's performance walks a tightrope between earnest and campy, making him the perfect protagonist for Raimi's brand of horror comedy. Ash would go on to become a cult hero, especially as the franchise leaned more into the comedic elements in later installments. But it all started here, with Campbell swinging axes and wielding chainsaws in what would become his breakout role. Beyond the film itself, The Evil Dead is a testament to the power of perseverance and passion. Raimi, along with Campbell and producer Robert Tappert, poured everything they had into making this movie. They even went door to door showing potential investors a short demo film, Within the Woods, to raise the funds they needed. And their gamble paid off in spades. The Evil Dead has become a cult classic, inspiring countless filmmakers, spawning a franchise that includes sequels, a TV series, and even a stage musical. The impact of The Evil Dead can't be overstated. It didn't just scare audiences, it inspired a generation of horror directors like Eli Roth and Fede Alvarez, who would later remake the film in 2013. Raimi's bold, unapologetic approach to filmmaking proved that creativity and passion could overcome the smallest of budgets. So when you watch The Evil Dead, you're not just seeing a great horror film. You're witnessing the birth of a fearless, imaginative filmmaker who would go on to give us Spider-Man and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But it all began with a cabin in the woods, a Necronomicon, and a young director with something to prove. Number 3. At just 23 years old, John Singleton made history in 1991 with Boys in the Hood, a film that wasn't just a cinematic debut, it was a cultural earthquake. Imagine being fresh out of film school with a story so deeply personal and urgent that it not only gets made, but also earns you an Oscar nomination for Best Director. That's exactly what Singleton accomplished, making him the youngest nominee in the category at the time and the first African American to receive the honor. What makes Boys in the Hood so remarkable is its honesty. Singleton wasn't just telling a story, he was opening a window into the realities of life in South Central Los Angeles, a world he knew firsthand. The film follows Trey, Doughboy, and Ricky, 3 young men navigating the challenges of growing up in an environment shaped by systemic racism, poverty, and violence. But it's not just about their struggles, it's about their humanity. Singleton's writing and direction cut straight to the heart, blending raw emotion with social commentary. He doesn't shy away from showing the harsh realities of the neighborhood, gang violence, police brutality, and broken families. But he also weaves in moments of love, friendship, and hope. It's a story about choices and the systemic forces that often limit them. And Singleton captured it with such authenticity that it felt like a revelation to audiences both familiar and unfamiliar with this reality. The cast, which includes Cuba Gooding Jr., Ice Cube, and Morris Chestnut, delivers performances that feel lived in and real. Singleton's ability to draw such powerful performances, especially from Ice Cube in his acting debut, speaks to his talent not just as a director, but as a storyteller who understood his characters and the world they inhabited. Boys in the Hood was a wake-up call. It forced audiences, especially those outside the Black community, to confront uncomfortable truths about America's urban centers and the inequalities that truly shape them. It was more than entertainment, it was a message, a mirror, and a megaphone. The film's impact went far beyond awards and accolades. It inspired a wave of socially conscious filmmaking and opened doors for a new generation of Black filmmakers. Singleton proved that stories from marginalized communities weren't just worth telling, they were essential. Now, over 30 years later, Boys in the Hood remains as powerful and relevant as ever, a testament to Singleton's vision and the enduring importance of his voice in the cinematic landscape. At number 2 on my list is Jordan Peele's Get Out, a debut that was a cultural lightning rod. Released in 2017, this film marked Peele's transition from comedy to horror, a move that surprised many, but ultimately redefined what a horror movie could be. With Get Out, Peele didn't just deliver a scare, he delivered a message wrapped in tension, wit, and layers of social commentary. What makes Get Out revolutionary is how it uses horror to dissect real-world issues. The film takes a scalpel to themes of race, privilege, and the subtleties of modern racism. Peele taps into a pervasive unease that many experience but few discuss, turning what could have been a straightforward thriller into a biting social critique. And he does it with such finesse that you might not realize you're being educated as much as you're being entertained, until the credits roll and you're left sitting in stunned silence. Now, we know the story follows Chris, played by Daniel Kaluuya, as he visits his white girlfriend's family for the first time. What begins as polite awkwardness quickly spirals into something far more sinister. Peele's use of horror tropes like isolation, helplessness, and the uncanny creates an atmosphere of escalating dread. But what's truly brilliant is how he subverts those tropes, using them to reflect societal fears that are all too real. Take, for instance, The Sunken Place. It's more than just a chilling visual. It's a metaphor for the silencing and marginalization of black voices. It's one of the many layers of symbolism Peele weaves into the narrative, making Get Out a film you can unpack long after your first watch. Every line of dialogue, every camera angle, every musical cue is intentional and loaded with meaning. And then there's Peele's knack for blending horror with dark humor, moments of levity, like Lil Rel Howery's hilarious turn as Rod, the TSA agent and ultimate best friend, don't undercut the tension, they heighten it. The humor serves as a release valve, letting us catch our breath before plunging back into the nightmare. And Get Out was more than a critical and commercial success, it was a cultural event. It sparked countless discussions, think pieces, memes, proving that horror can be as intellectually engaging as it is terrifying. Peele's work was so impactful that it earned him the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay, a rare achievement for any filmmaker, let alone a first-time director. With Get Out, Jordan Peele didn't just announce himself as a filmmaker to watch. He reshaped the genre, showing that horror can be a vehicle for exploring complex societal issues. It's a film that resonates, challenges, and stays with us. Peele's debut was nothing short of groundbreaking, so for me it's no surprise that it sat near the top of my list. Now, before I get into number one, I do want to acknowledge that there are a few films out there that I'm sure I missed. Three that popped right into my head right away. My favorite horror movie of all time was also a directorial debut, and that's Tobe Hooper's 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I chose to not put that one on the list because if I put it here, I just talk about it too much. So I wanted to give it space to something else to highlight a different film. A couple more. Duel by Steven Spielberg. It's not my favorite of his movies, but it is good and it shows who he would become. Similarly with THX 1138, really good sci-fi AI kind of drama relevant to today by George Lucas. But there's so many great movies. The 10 I chose in this list were just the ones that maybe hold the most meaning for me on a day-to-day basis when making my decisions on whether I like a movie or not. These are just so important. With that, taking the top spot on my list is a film that shook the cinematic world in the early 90s. That is Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. If you've ever wondered what a perfect debut looks like, this is it. Released in 1992, Reservoir Dogs was an electrifying introduction to Tarantino's now iconic style. Even at the start of his career, it was clear that this was a filmmaker who wasn't just here to follow the rules, he was here to rewrite them. So let's talk about what made Reservoir Dogs so revolutionary. First, there's the razor-sharp dialogue. Tarantino doesn't just write conversations, he crafts verbal sparring matches, loaded with wit, tension, and personality. The opening scene alone, a seemingly mundane discussion about tipping in a diner, manages to establish character dynamics, build tension, and entertain, all while setting the stage for what's to come. Then there's the iconic non-linear storytelling. Tarantino took what could have been a straightforward crime drama and turned it into a fractured narrative masterpiece. By jumping between timelines, he forces us to piece together the story, creating a sense of mystery and unpredictability that keeps us glued to the screen. It's a structure that would become a hallmark of his work, seen later in films like Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill. And let's not forget the characters. Each member of the heist crew, with their color-coded names, Mr. White, Mr. Pink, Mr. Blonde, and so on, is distinct, memorable, and brilliantly brought to life by a stellar ensemble cast. Harvey Keitel, Steve Buscemi, Michael Madsen, Tim Roth, and even Tarantino himself all deliver performances that feel raw, intense, and completely believable. The violence in Reservoir Dogs was another talking point when it first came out. Tarantino doesn't just show violence, he makes you feel its weight and impact. The infamous ear-cutting scene, set to Steelers Wheel, they're stuck in the middle with you, is both horrifying and darkly comic. A juxtaposition that only Tarantino could pull off. And then there's the soundtrack. Tarantino's use of music is legendary, and Reservoir Dogs is where we see it all begin. The film's retro rock and roll soundtrack creates this vibe where the whole film is amplified and has a unique rhythm and tone. Songs like Little Green Bag and Hooked on a Feeling feel inextricably linked to the movie, creating a vibe that's cool but haunting. Perhaps, though, the most remarkable thing about Reservoir Dogs is what it achieved on such a modest budget. Made for just $1.2 million, the film looks and feels like a much bigger production. Tarantino's ability to work within constraints and still deliver something so polished and impactful speaks volumes about his talent and vision. In the years since its release, Reservoir Dogs has been hailed as one of the greatest independent films of all time, and a defining moment in 90s cinema. It didn't just launch Tarantino's career, it redefined the possibilities of what indie filmmaking could achieve. The film is raw, unapologetic, and brimming with energy. A perfect encapsulation of Tarantino's audacious entry into the world of cinema. That's why The Reservoir Dogs isn't just a great debut, it's a game changer. From the gritty streets of Los Angeles depicted in John Singleton's Boys in the Hood, to the surreal and haunting landscapes of David Lynch's Eraserhead, these films serve as a testament to the magic of a bold debut. They remind me that filmmaking is, at its core, an act of creative courage, an opportunity to take risks, break conventions, and tell stories in ways that haven't been seen before. What's fascinating about these directorial debuts is they don't just give us great films, they give us a glimpse into the minds of the directors as artists at their most raw and unfiltered. There's something uniquely powerful about seeing a filmmaker's voice take shape for the first time. These are movies made by people who had something urgent to say, whether it was through the claustrophobic paranoia of Reservoir Dogs, the biting social commentary of Get Out, or the absurd hilarity of This Is Spinal Tap. The beauty of a great debut is that it's not just about the film itself, it's about the legacy it leaves behind. Each of the movies I discussed today didn't just make waves, they inspired countless filmmakers, writers, and dreamers to pick up a camera and tell their own stories. Imagine the ripple effects of George Romero's Night of the Living Dead on the horror genre, or how Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs redefined what independent cinema could be. These are films that changed the game, proving that passion, creativity, and determination can overcome even the smallest budgets or the steepest odds. So as I wrap up this episode, I want to leave you the question: what are your favorite directorial debuts? Are there any filmmakers whose first films made you fall in love with their work? Or maybe even with movies in general? Let me know on social media, on Instagram and Threads at RealRealTalk, because I'd love to hear your picks and discuss them with you. But before we go, don't forget to subscribe to Real Real Talk if you haven't already. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review. It helps the show grow and reach more movie lovers like you. And of course, share this episode with anyone who loves cinema as much as we do. And if horror is more your thing, come check me out at Real Talk Horror. Anywhere you found this podcast, we're there as well. And as always, thank you for joining me on this cinematic journey. Until next time, keep watching, keep loving, and keep those reels rolling. Thank you, everybody.
Underneath the silver screen, gleam, gleam, talking reels and all their schemes. Dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told in shadows bold. Gritty plots and whispers tight, dim the streets in moonlight bright.